Today we're going to go into the third dimension, and what we're going to start with is how to calculate volume. To do this, you need to know the different types of solids out there. You have prisms, cylinders, pyramids, and cones. Okay, so let's go ahead and start our volume. Now, when finding the volume of a prism or a cylinder, you use the basic formula volume equals big B times H, where big B stands for the area of the base and H stands for height of the solid. Now let's go back to big B for a second. It says area of a base, just one base, because prisms and cylinders have two bases. They're parallel and they are congruent. So it's just one of those bases, not both. Okay? Now for a cylinder, we can take that formula, big B times H, and plug in pi r squared for the big B, because it doesn't matter what size your circle is on a cylinder, you're always going to use pi r squared. So pi r squared H would be the proper formula for volume of a cylinder. Let's look at our first example problem. This is a rectangular prism, meaning your bases are rectangles. Now if you've noticed here, I've highlighted or I've shaded in that my bases are the 5 by 5 rectangle. But if you said, hey, couldn't it have been the 5 by 4 rectangles on the sides or on the front and back? You would also have been correct. A rectangular prism has a special case in which what you choose to be your bases doesn't matter. You're still going to come out with the same calculations and volume. So I chose for my base to be the 5 by 5. So when I did my big B, it was base times height, which is 5 times 5, which gave me 25 centimeters squared. And the height of the prism from base to base was 4 centimeters. So I multiplied those two together and got that the volume of this rectangular prism is 100 centimeters cubed. Let's look at a different type of prism. How about an octagonal prism? Here, to figure out big B, I have to use A times P divided by 2. They luckily gave us our apothem, 7.2426, and the perimeter is simply 6 times 8 sides, which is 48. So I plug them into my formula, 7.2426 times 48, divide that by 2, and I get the 173.822 inches squared. The height from base to base is 9 inches. I multiply those two together and I get that the total volume is 1,564.4 inches cubed. Now let's look at a cylinder. Again, change it to pi r squared h. It makes things a lot easier. My radius is 7. My height was 3. I plug them in. 7 squared is 49 times 3 gives me 147 pi, and that's meters cubed. Now, if you notice, I'm not changing this to a decimal. That's because I want the most accurate you can give me. And if you leave it in terms of pi, that's the most accurate answer you can give. Now let's look at the triangular prism. Here, they didn't give me the height of the triangle. So I had to use Pythagorean theorem to figure that out. And that was square root of 5 squared minus 3 squared, and it gave me my height was 4. So I did 3 times 4 divided by 2, and I got that the area of the base was 6 millimeters squared, and the height of that prism is 12 millimeters, so 6 times 12 gives me 72 millimeters cubed. Here's another triangular prism, little b times h over 2. 16 was my base. Again, I had to use Pythagorean theorem to get my height. I did 17 squared minus 8 squared, knowing that because this is an isosceles triangle, the height bisects the base of that triangle, so that made this 8. Which then gave me my calculation of 15 for the height of my triangle. So I could do 16 times 15 divided by 2, which gave me 120 centimeters squared. The height of the prism from base to base was 30 centimeters. So 120 times 30 gives me 3,600 centimeters cubed. Now, let's switch gears. Instead of prisms and cylinders, I want to talk about pyramids and cones. If I'm looking at a pyramid, the volume of a pyramid is big B times H divided by 3. For a cone, we can do the same exact thing that we did with the cylinder because the base of a cone is always a circle. So we can plug in pi r squared for big B, and it becomes pi r squared H divided by 3. So now let's do some problems. Here is your basic cone, which I know is pi r squared H over 3. So I plug everything in. 5 is the radius. I square that, it's 25. Multiply that by 12, divide by 3, and I get that the volume is 100 pi inches cubed. That was an easy one. Let's look at a different one. Ooh, this one's a bit more challenging. Again, pi r squared H over 3. My radius, I have to figure out using this right triangle right here, and knowing that this side was 30 degrees told me this side was also 30 degrees, which means this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle right here. And knowing my properties of a 30, 60, 90 triangle, the hypotenuse is twice the smallest side, which is across from the 30. So half of 16 is 8. Then to get the height, I take that smallest side and I multiply by square root of 3. So 8 square root of 3 is my height. Then I plug everything in. Pi times 8 squared times 8 square root of 3, all divided by 3, and that gives me 928.665 yards cubed. Okay, so let's flip gears. Let's go away from cones and let's look at a pyramid. This pyramid is a square pyramid. The bottom is a square. So big B would just be base times height, which would be 10 times 10, which is 100 inches squared. Your height is 5 inches. How did I get that height? Well, I look, this triangle here in the middle, they tell me this angle is 45. Now, because it's hard to see when it's ingrained inside of the pyramid, I like to pull it out and draw it on its own. Knowing that this is a 45, 45, 90, I know that the two legs are the same. How do I know it's 5? Well, I look, this right here is the apothem of the triangle. And it being the apothem means it's half of the side length of that square. So it would be 5. And because it's 5, the height is 5. So I plug in 100 times 5. Oh, I forgot to divide by 3. So 500 divided by 3 is 166.667 inches cubed. Alright, now let's look at a composite figure. A composite figure is when you have two figures put together. Now, if I look here, I've got a cone and I've got a cylinder. In order to get the volume of the whole thing, I'm just going to add those two volumes together. So I do volume of a cone, pi r squared H over 3. I plug in that the radius is 5, the height of the cone is 4, and I get 100 pi over 3 for the volume of the cone. I do the volume of the cylinder. I use pi r squared H. I plug in the radius again is 5 squared times 12 is the height of the cylinder, and that gives me 300 pi. So to get the total volume, I have to add the two together, and that would give me 300 pi plus 100 pi over 3 centimeters cubed. Now I leave it like that so it's the most accurate answer. I could change it to a decimal and then round, but I want to leave it like this because it is the most accurate. Ooh, let's take a look at this one. Instead of adding here, I need to subtract because this rectangular prism in the middle is hollow, meaning it's not part of the pink area. So, in order to get the volume of the pink portion, I need to find the volume of the big prism and subtract off the volume of the small prism. The volume of the big prism is just base times height, so 10 times 6 times 5, which gives me 300. Then find the volume of the small prism, 2 times 2.5 times 5 is 25. subtract the 2, and I get that the total volume is 275 centimeters cubed. Alright, now we're going to work a little differently. I'm going to give you the volume, and I'm going to give you a couple pieces and ask you to solve for the unknown piece. And then, for instance, they shaded this rectangle right here, so this must be my base, which means this is also 3 centimeters right here. So to find the area of the base, little b times h would be 14 times 3, which is 42. Height of my prism would be x. I don't know that. So volume 294 equals 42x divided by 42. I get that x, the height of my prism, is 7 centimeters. Finally, let's look at a cone. If I told you this cone's volume was 96 pi and I wanted you to solve for the radius, you would simply set the 96 pi equal to pi r squared h over 3. Your h is 8, because they did give you that. Plug that in. Multiply by the 3, that becomes 288 pi equals 8 pi r squared. Divide by the 8 pi, you get 36 as your radius squared, so your radius would end up being 6 inches. Okay, I know that was kind of quick. If you need to rewatch this to really get the gist of it, that's fine, go right ahead. That's the end of the volume, basic volume unit.